This is Blind Ham News with stories of interest to blind and visually impaired hams. With today's report, here is Steve Bauer W0QA.
Welcome to the Blind Ham News Podcast. This is episode number 1. What we're going to do with this podcast is make it available through the CQ Blind Hams podcast feed that is already in place. And we're going to give you news and information on topics and stories of interest to blind and visually impaired hams. Now, there are a couple of ways you can submit story ideas and information, and I will give you that information in just a few seconds. We are going to release podcasts periodically, not on a scheduled basis, kind of base it on how much information and the stories that we receive. So if you have story ideas or suggestions or information that you would like to pass along, here's the email address. It's blindhamnews@gmail.com. blindhamnews@gmail.com. You can also call and leave a voicemail message if you would like, and that phone number is 662-426-6397. It's 662-HAM-NEWS. So that's a couple of ways you can submit story ideas as we begin a new podcast feature, and looking forward to seeing it grow. This week I am talking with Derick Flint KC1QXL from Washington, Vermont. He was involved in providing communications and getting assistance for some other ham radio operators whose car had become stuck on, almost going over a cliff on some ice. So we're going to learn about that adventure and how it all played out. Oftentimes, cell phones just don't work, but in many cases, ham radio does work. And Derick Flint from Washington, Vermont had an experience where cell phones didn't work and ham radio did. Derick's call is KC1QXL. Derick, thanks for joining us here on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to join you guys, and I'm really excited to be a ham radio operator. I had a lot of fun doing it and been enjoying myself.
How long have you been licensed?
I have been licensed for 2 years this month in March, so been a really long ride, been really enjoying it, and I'm working on getting my general at this point.
Well, congratulations. Well, you were involved in a situation where some people were in a bad way and they were calling for help, and you were able to help them out. We're actually going to let the audio from a video from YouTube tell the full story, but kind of lead us into what happened, if you would.
One day I was sitting down having lunch, and I heard the radio going off. It was on the Mount Washington repeater, the W1NH. And it kept going off with a little bit of static here, a little bit of noise there, and every so often you would hear a little bit of audio and here and there, and and then I was like, it seemed like somebody's ka-chunking way too many times to try to see if they can get in the repeater, so that it must be some sort of emergency thing. So I went over and started working my way through the situation, and we ended up able to get some help to the people and getting them all rescued. So definitely a life-changing experience by all means. Something I was never expecting to have part in.
Have you had any contact with the hams that you talked to and you helped rescue?
Yes. I actually talked to Nick and Ben on the internet and on the radio, I would say frequently. We do want to meet this summer. We're hoping to have a meetup with Roger, one of my friends that helped me with the rescue, and then we're going to hopefully kind of meet up with Nick and Ben and do a face-to-face. It'll be really cool to see.
Well, Derick, you did a great job in getting help to some people that were in desperate need and kind of let ham radio shine.
Yeah, it was amazing. I was never expecting WMUR to do that newscast on us. It was the New Hampshire Chronicles, and it was almost heard worldwide at times, because there was people up in Quebec that did an article on us, and then there was stuff throughout the United States, and there was actually some people that reached out from overseas as well. So definitely an inspiration, and when I first got into the hobby, I was never expecting to do anything like this. I got in the hobby because I'm visually impaired, and you don't need good vision to talk on the radio. That's one of the reasons why I joined.
Roger, yeah, we're still probably 30 miles from Mount Washington.
It was December 4th, 2022.
Repeat your question. I heard something I couldn't quite copy.
Ham radio operator Derick Flint had his radio on.
It's like it was yesterday. It was one of those amazing things.
When he heard something unusual in the static.
This is KC1QXL. I'm here. There's still no audio.
What he didn't know, there were two men stranded in northern New Hampshire, and those radios were about to save their lives.
We got there, the conditions were snowy, but not icy.
On that fateful morning, Nick Lang of Plastow and his friend Ben were driving around Pittsburgh, New Hampshire, a place he'd been many times. Nick was prepared. He happens to be an emergency response volunteer and licensed ham radio operator.
So my call sign is KC1OTX. That's Kilo Charlie 1 Oscar Tango X-Ray.
He packed a small handheld radio for his trip.
I put it in my car as a last-minute thing.
He'd need it when the conditions on a remote road turned very icy.
As soon as the traction control kicked on, that's when I decided it was time to turn around. And when I turned around is when everything kind of went wrong.
The car started sliding.
We ended up spinning 3 complete times, the full 360.
Hanging over an embankment, Nick couldn't open his door. So Ben got out to secure the car with rope so it wouldn't slide more.
He was cranking it, and the hook snapped and launched across the road and smashed his kneecap.
Ben was injured. The car was stuck, and there was no cell service to call for help. So Nick climbed to higher ground to see if anyone could hear him on his ham radio.
I was saying my call sign. I was saying SOS. I was saying 911. I was saying emergency.
He was in luck. The Mount Washington repeater picked up his call so other operators could hear it, like Derick Flint, some 54 miles from Mount Washington in Vermont. Derick is visually impaired and fell in love with radio only months before. Now, he was thrown into a radio-driven rescue.
I was over there for like a half an hour trying to get something, and what ended up happening was I ended up getting him to say like 911.
Yeah, that was a harder copy that time, but I didn't copy that your vehicle went off the road into a ditch, I believe you said.
At the time, I couldn't hear their complete call sign, but I heard somebody, and that gave me hope.
By now, another radio op, Roger Marcoux in Bartlett, was listening in.
W1XCJ from K1DFA.
He, too, was trying to hear where the stranded men were through the static.
This is McGalloway Road, and we did get, syllable by syllable, we got that they're on McGalloway Road.
Finally, a location. 911 was called, but a rescue was still hours away.
Assume there's 2 people in there now, potentially. I know one of the firefighters are trying the ham radio side, but I'm not sure if he's out there or not.
Back in Vermont, Derick could barely hear updates from the men stuck in Pittsburgh.
So at this point, we'll just do this since your signal's horrible.
A code system with no words.
I said do 1 ka-chunk for yes and nothing for no.
And it worked.
We thought we heard him say icy, and then we said, did you say icy? And then they said yes, and they said, so we're assuming icy road. Did you go off the road? And then they clicked yes, they went off the road.
While Roger and Derick waited anxiously for about 3 hours, they finally heard rescue crews arrived. Ben and Nick were safe. The guys breathed a sigh of relief.
But thank you very much for all the help today, Roger. It was an amazing thing we did. And hopefully we don't have to do it anytime soon.
The guy goes, thank you. Thank you very much for saving my life today. So that said it all right there. I mean, it was pretty serious on their end for sure. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much for saving my life today. I'm glad you guys made it out okay.
Have a story or information to submit for the podcast? Send it by email to blindhamnews@gmail.com or call 662-426-6397. That's 662-HAM-NEWS. Thanks for your help.
I'm Steve W0QA, and that's the report this time. I hope you can join me again for another Blind Ham News podcast. 73, and thanks for listening.